So we need to talk, ladies and gentlemen. I'm getting a little bit nervous for markets heading into tomorrow, and I'll explain why that is, and we will look at some of the best and brightest investors on Wall Street and what they're saying about tomorrow's big event. If you don't know what tomorrow's big event is, if you're living under a rock, maybe you have your internet taken out because of the storms that just went through the US last night, well, it's Nvidia, okay? What you see here on the charts. And it's so interesting. The consensus is exactly the same by pretty much everyone in the markets. The consensus is Nvidia is going to beat and raise. But is that already priced into the stock? I am going to share this clip from CNBC. It is quite long, so feel free to skip through it if you would like. But this is all about Nvidia, the expectations, and what these individuals think is going to happen.
I want to get those out of the way before we talk about really what's at stake over the next 24 hours, Bryn. And we know it's looming with Nvidia earnings. You're obviously in the stock. Interesting price action today, too, in the NASDAQ, which is attempting to go positive. And if it gets there, it's going to be because of stocks like Nvidia, which right hugging the flat line today, but right around that 950 level. How about Apple, that comeback that stock's had above 192? What do you think's really at stake with these earnings that are looming?
I mean, I think the earnings Oscars are tomorrow, and Best Picture will go to Nvidia. I mean, we all know the estimates are 242% revenue growth with 412% earnings growth. And so I think they're going to continue to have another crushing quarter. I think between Jensen and Satya, they're like two rock stars. He's going to have an awesome earnings call. He's going to sprinkle in a bunch of other companies that will have a halo effect tomorrow when after the earnings come out. And so I just think this stock continues to be somewhat underappreciated. I mean, it's up 90% year to date, so I say underappreciated.
Yeah, underappreciated. But I can't help but laugh.
Well, let me explain, put some context. Yesterday, Dan Niles was on one of the shows, and he had a really good point that Nvidia is actually trading at 15% below its 5-year PE average. And so that's what I'm talking about. And so I still think that there's this sentiment that sometime in the next quarter or 2 quarters, Nvidia is going to start acting like a traditional cyclical semiconductor company where all of a sudden earnings and revenues start growing at a slower pace and decelerating. I think that absolutely will happen, but I don't think it's going to happen until maybe the back half of this year or 2025. So I think you'll see a one handle, 1,000 on the stock before you see it 800.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting 24 hours for certainly holders of Nvidia like you and Josh and Jim. What do you feel like is at stake as we look ahead to tomorrow?
Well, a lot's at stake, and the question is what's going to happen. I totally agree with Bryn's assessment of the company itself. As far as the cyclicality, I do think the cyclicality will assert itself, but not in the next 1 to 2 quarters. I think maybe in the next 3 to 4 quarters. That's obviously not the near term. But Scott, to answer your question, as I think about the stock right now, I think about this quarter, the estimates from a year ago, and remember, it was a year ago when they had that first blowout quarter that just all of a sudden made people like me understand this was a different company than the usual. Those estimates for this quarter are up 230% from a year ago. That's a lot. Okay, they're up 20% in the year to date. And my point on this, we all know what the stock has done is, I would not be surprised, again, to Bryn's point, if you have a beat and raise tomorrow afternoon. I would not be surprised if the stock popped in the after hours. And I also wouldn't be surprised if at the end of the week it actually trailed off a little bit. Let me be clear, I'm not negative on the stock, I'm long the stock. But there is a point where you have to ask how much of this is priced in.
Yeah.
I know the earnings estimates going out the next 5 years are 31% annualized growth. That's going to be hard to come by for the next 5 years. Next 2 to 3 quarters, sure.
The growth now versus then, so to speak, I think we have a graphic to kind of show you what is expected. Earnings are expected to be 5 times greater than they were last year. Mm-hmm. Revenues are poised to more than triple from a year ago. There we go. That's on our wall. That yes, we think it's the most impactful earnings report on the S&P right now, just given what that stock has done. It's a near double already in 5 months, and how much it's responsible for the look, I mean, there's a fair amount of hype around AI, but they're realizing it too, and the way they're monetizing it. So that's why, Steph, there's so much at stake, especially when some are suggesting, boy, the NASDAQ has gone from oversold to overbought seemingly overnight.
Yeah, well, look, Nvidia is 5% weight of the S&P 500, but obviously AI touches so many different companies throughout technology, throughout other sectors in the market, throughout the economy, and we're in the second or third innings. I think there are a lot of various different ways you can play that theme. I'm not in Nvidia, as you know, but I am in other names that have done quite well over the last 2 years as well. So I think you got to pick your spots. I think the expectations are quite high for Nvidia, especially because the hyperscalers gave you that information. They told you that the 4 big hyperscalers, Amazon, Meta, Google, and Microsoft, are going to spend $177 billion in CapEx for cloud and generative AI this year alone. That's just enormous, right? And then global CapEx is actually going to grow $225 billion this year alone. So clearly that benefits a lot of companies. Nvidia is included in that. I think as a result, if let's just say it doesn't meet these aggressive expectations and the stock falls, I really do think you're going to see buyers come in. So I don't think it's going to be down for long, especially given the growth rates that we just heard that Bryn was talking about, Jimmy was talking about as well. So I'm just choosing to play it a different way, but certainly it is a very, very important report.
Yeah, there's no doubt. By the way, Evercore ISI, long and strong into the print, outperform 1160. Is the price target. So Josh, as you know, you're our guy on Nvidia. How good does this have to be? We know the bar is high. How could it not be? Stocks up 200% over the last year, up almost a double, as I said, in some 5 months.
The bar's been high, Playboy, and you know what? Every quarter we're told this is the quarter that something's going to go horribly wrong, and it just hasn't happened yet. Look at the last time they reported, which was February. Earnings per share came in at $5.16. The estimate was $4.64. Do you have any idea how many times earnings were revised higher to get to that $4.64? And they still stepped right over it like it wasn't even there. $22.1 billion in revenue versus $20.6. They crushed that too. The stock went up 16.5%. In response, it had its market cap growth in that single day of $276 billion, the most any company has had in one day market cap growth ever. So it's not like Nvidia is it's pretty shaky historically. We know what happens if they come in better than expected. Now, to the earlier point being made, Nvidia is already the third best performer in the S&P. In fact, the only 2 better performers, SMCI is up 224%. Vista Corp, which is a utility, is up 140. Nvidia is up 90. But all 3 of them are up on AI stuff. So it's not underappreciated by the market how good Nvidia is. So I'm trying to maintain a balance. I'm trying to maintain a balanced point of view. I highly doubt this company will come out, beat earnings, and then have anything other than positive things to say, but about the second half of the year, given the rate at which people and corporations are spending on this stuff. What we don't know is how much is already priced in, and that, frankly, to me, is the real thing that's going to be revealed tonight.
Yeah, been crazy tomorrow. Crazy. The stock, goes down.
Like I said at the beginning of this video, I'm getting a little nervous because everyone has the same expectation. A beat and raise is coming. It probably is. But Nvidia's expectations are so ungodly high. You really have to come in and impress investors, as the stock is now in the 950s. I think this would be a lot different if the stock was in the 700s, in the 800s, even the low 900s wouldn't be as bad. You're mid 900s, right? You're $950 or so per share, nearly at a new all-time high. If you are reporting into a new all-time high, there's a lot already priced into the stock. Okay, that's clear. Now, a couple individuals have started to point out maybe the inventory essentially slow down, the cyclicality of semiconductors will start to show through with Nvidia as well. I don't know if that is going to be obvious to investors coming tomorrow, meaning that the second half of this year, 2025, you could see a slowdown. But Wall Street will start to price that in, and they're going to be paying a very close attention to every word that Jensen Huang says tomorrow. And I think there's more room for disappointment than people think. No, I don't think Nvidia is going to miss. I don't think they're going to miss on guidance. But when expectations are this high, it's easy to get a disappointment even when you beat on earnings. And I think that is the big risk to Nvidia. Now, some stocks did exceptionally well today. Tesla was up 6.3%. The S&P was basically flat, up 0.06%. The NASDAQ is actually down today by just a touch as well, about 0.10%. Nvidia is actually trading down about 0.10% as well. Big tech, mixed bag again across the board. Meta is down almost 1%. Amazon is down 0.69%. Apple is up almost 1%. Google's up 0.3%. So it's a little bit of a mixed bag today, and everyone's kind of waiting for Nvidia. In fact, Nvidia earnings are pricing in an over 1% move higher or lower in the options market for the S&P and the NASDAQ. That is more than what we priced in for the last CPI report. So Nvidia is seen as a macro catalyst, not just a micro catalyst for Nvidia and, semiconductors, but semiconductors are so important to the markets, this AI trade, that you're actually pricing in an over 1% move for the S&P and the NASDAQ based on Nvidia earnings. That, from my knowledge, has never happened before. Now, as Tom Lee said, if Nvidia comes in and meets expectations and they meet or beat, then you probably see a broadening out of our markets. You probably see capital go into other areas of the markets. Think about it like this. If all of these fund managers are, getting requests from their clients to own Nvidia, and Nvidia just continues to do well, and AI is the future, and there's all this hype there, you almost have to own that, right? You almost have to own AI. Whether it's Nvidia, AMD, SMCI, whatever it is. Even if you don't necessarily want to, even if you think valuations are quite stretched, you almost have to own it because your clients will leave if you don't own it. Or if the stock continues to run, you'll miss out even more. So a little bit of a reset after earnings. Maybe Nvidia falls to the low 900s on a beat and raise. That's a very real possibility here. That could lead other money to go elsewhere into other areas of the markets, because maybe that does cool down some of the frenzy around Nvidia and around AI. And that's what Tom Lee just said yesterday. He said, quote, "If Nvidia beats expectations, I think it's going to pull money off the sidelines," says FundStrat's Tom Lee ahead of the chipmakers' earnings next week. I think, again, it probably helps propel a broadening of this market rally. Now, today, markets are not broadening. We have not gotten Nvidia. And the money is really trading in just, small areas of the markets, like Tesla up 6.5% today. There's a lot of excitement around certain stocks in certain areas today, but the average stock you can see is falling under its 50-day moving average about 1% of the markets, right? And I guess I shouldn't have said the average stock. The average stock is not. But 1% of all stocks out there today are falling under their 50-day moving average, which when this is green, when the average stock or, just normal stocks are breaking above their 50-day moving average more than they're breaking under, that, tends to mean that stocks generally are doing well today. Now, it's actually pretty interesting that stocks are not generally doing well today, because your 10-year treasury yields are down about 2 basis points, which that's not a huge fall, but usually when you see 10-year treasury yields fall, stocks tend to do well. But you're not actually seeing that today. And I think that's because there's a lot of jitters around what could happen tomorrow with, obviously, Nvidia. Now, the VIX is actually down about 1%. You were up 1% yesterday. So I think that's pretty interesting. The Russell is the underperformer today. The Russell is down 0.31%. If we take a look at CNN's Fear and Greed Index today, you can also see that this is falling a little bit from 64 yesterday to 62 to 2 today, mostly because of the stock price strength is now in fear territory. Market momentum is greed. Stock price breadth is greed, even though it's actually falling a little bit today. Put and call options, extreme greed. Market volatility is neutral. Safe haven demand is extreme greed. And junk bond demand is neutral today. You did have some very encouraging comments today from different Fed officials. Most notably, Fed Waller really got the markets optimistic to some degree, right? Some areas like Tesla and just some areas, okay? Fed Waller says data is not looking like we need to raise rates. Fed Waller says the idea of only one cut doesn't make a lot of sense. That, my friends, is fantastic news. Here, lately, you've had Fed Mester and Fed Kashkari that have come out and said, maybe we're not even at neutral. Maybe we need to raise rates again. And then Fed Waller says, data is not looking like we need to raise rates. That one cut doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Maybe we get more than that. So that is good news. You also did have Raphael Bostic, Christopher Waller, and others that did make some quotes. Here's kind of the summary. It says, Federal Reserve Governor Christopher Waller expressed a cautious stance on interest rate cuts, emphasizing the need for several more months of positive inflation data before supporting such a move. He acknowledged progress in April's Consumer Price Index (CPI) report towards the 2% inflation target, but remains wary of declaring victory prematurely. Waller indicated that further rate hikes are likely unnecessary, but stressed the importance of sustained positive inflation trends before considering easing monetary policy. Other officials, including Bostic, also suggested a cautious approach, probably not before the fourth quarter. Waller noted that the probability of a recession seems to have disappeared, and he believes that further rate hikes are probably unnecessary. He also stated that the last CPI was a reassuring signal that inflation is not accelerating. So based on all the Fed talk that we have had lately, Fed officials coming out and saying, yeah, we're really not seeing that acceleration anymore in inflation. We don't need to raise rates again and can think about cutting rates later this year. All of that is great news compared to what we've heard lately with a lot of talk from Fed Mester, Super Hawk, Kashkari, Super Hawk. So this was a breath of fresh air for especially the bond market and for investors. Now, today, you did have Macy's, Lowe's, AutoZone, XPeng, and others that did report earnings. Today and after hours, you will get Toll Brothers. To be honest, the worst that is, it's probably not going to be bad, but if it is bad, that will be seen as good news by the markets. Now, tomorrow morning, you're going to get Target, TJX, and Analog Devices that will report earnings. Target, I'm a little concerned about Target's earnings because they announced just yesterday they were going to lower prices on 5,000 generalized home good items. That's a lot of items. They probably are seeing a real slowdown in consumers going to their stores. Now, I don't know if markets will pick up on that and say, that's bad news. Not sure if that's going to happen. But if Target does miss, that's something you want to be watching for. Because I was thinking about this. I'm like, because I thought Walmart's earnings were going to be so important for the state of the consumer. But when I really thought about the way that inflation is right now, it's basically in everything. Walmart should be the last place, the last frontier, if you will, that sees a slowdown. Because Walmart has the lowest prices, right? So that should be the last place that slows down. Target, though, could be one of the first. Target is not a discount retailer, right? You're not getting deals if you go shop at Target. So Target could be vulnerable here. Now, Wednesday and after hours, tomorrow and after hours, Nvidia, Snowflake, Elf, Synopsys, and others will report earnings. This is by far the biggest day of this earnings season coming tomorrow for markets. And whatever Nvidia says, whether it's great, okay, or bad, will have a broad market impact, like you've probably never seen before. Let me know what you think about this information down below in the comment section. I do believe whatever Nvidia says could fuel the next 5% for stocks, up or down. It makes some sense to maybe have some hedges on your portfolio heading into tomorrow, but then again, there's a lot that's already priced in. The expectation is, already high. There's, in the NASDAQ and the S&P, you're already pricing in a 1% move on Nvidia earnings. So it could be a little on the hard side to actually even try to hedge the portfolio for this event, or at least hedge it for cheap, because odds are Nvidia is going to do well. So be a little bit careful with hedges out there. Nonetheless, let me know what you think about this information down below in the comment section. Hit the like button as well as subscribe to the channel. You guys have a fantastic rest of your day, and I will see you in the next one.